Okay, we're good to go.
Ready to start? Okay, well, let's continue with the 10 seed groups. Today, I'll be discussing seed group 4, educators in the new age. Today I'll be providing some background information to supplement today's topic, such as about the New Group of World Servers or service group and their activities, and also a discussion a little bit on implementing right human relations. The themes that I'll be touching on today as they relate to education and be preparing the individual for life. The themes such as the tasks and objectives of the new age educators, the child's formative years and character building, the concept of world discipleship, and esoteric training or core teachings in an esoteric school. Oh, I should also ask if anybody has any comments or questions from last month's talk on the psychologist and the seed group 3. Does anybody have any comments or questions?
I don't see anything at this time.
All right. So if anybody has any questions or comments during today's talk, please post your question in the chat. I'll be stopping periodically to answer them. So, activities of the service workers. And again, the term I use, service workers, is the same as New Group of World Servers. New Group of World Servers, or the service workers, are a group who love humanity, and they are made up of men and women of goodwill, aspirants, disciples, and initiates, and they work in all fields of human activity and the seed groups. Across all cultures, and they're subjectively linked in helping to manifest the plan. In the early part of the 20th century, the masters, or the hierarchy, noted that there were numerous groups and workers working in a service capacity. At the conclave of 1925, the hierarchy decided at the ashramic level that the spiritual workers should move into becoming a cohesive group in carrying out the plan. On a subjective level, they work behind the scenes without recognition and currently number in the millions worldwide. In a parallel secular context, a non-spiritual understanding, they are also known as cultural creatives. This is a term that was coined by Paul Ray, a psychologist, and Sherry Ruth Anderson. Major function of the service workers group is to act as a bridge between humanity, hierarchy, and the ashrams. While doing this, they invoke thought forms, ideas, and impressions, and turn them into creative solutions that aid in the redemption and the upliftment of humanity. By bringing individuals and groups together, they facilitate a move towards cooperation, goodwill, and unity. New Group of World Servers is called the hands and the feet of hierarchy, and they spiritualize the thought life for each of the 10 seed groups and act as a synthesizing factor for establishing right human relations, particularly in the lower 18 subplanes. I'll show a chart shortly of the lower 18 subplanes, so that's a little more clear. They protect the spirit of truth and for creating the mental conditions where the mind of man could become receptive to the increasing greater light, such as through impression. Through their work, they create the conditions for right human relations to be implemented through individuals and groups. This will be part of the ideas discussed shortly about the future educators. We also mentioned before the stage of the Forerunner. This is the current time which we're in. We recall that the stage of the Forerunner refers to the increased activity on the inner planes between the hierarchy and the service workers for making changes toward implementing the plan. This is a period basically since 1925 that the service workers are preparing humanity for. They're preparing it for the externalization of the hierarchy and the reappearance of the Christ. Before the coming potencies of the Aquarian age can be effectively employed, humanity must break down all barriers of separativeness, isolation, and prejudice that are keeping men apart from each other. Among their tasks is to neutralize these ideologies that have forced or imposed their will on humanity by assertive governments and corporations, and has caused humanity to largely focus on all aspects of the form nature through misinformation. And I'll certainly be covering this more in the talks in January and February with the political observers talk. A lot of this will come together. We'll start building on the information from previous talks. Implementing right human relations. So what is right human relations? From externalization of the hierarchy, the Tibetan says, right human relations is not simply goodwill, it is a product or result of goodwill, and the instigator of constructive changes between individuals, communities, and nations. In essence, right human relations is the result of practiced love and acceptance among people, groups, and nations. Right human relations is the urge from Shambhala and hierarchy to influence humanity. Their intention is to stimulate man's will so that he will intelligently and wisely practice love and want his fellow men to work together instead of separately. Practicing right human relations is love in action. For the individual practicing right human relations, Alice Bailey wrote in Light of the Soul, harmlessness and truth to all beings are energies that, if practiced, the disciple would be perfect in his relationship with other people and for enabling right human relations in the physical and astral realms. We can also extend this by saying if the individual, the group, or the nation is practicing cooperation, goodwill, and inclusiveness, they would be perfect in their relationship with other people and nations. For the present, we hold that all individuals, politicians, scientists, medical professionals, and educators practice harmlessness. This involves man's physical acts as they are related to the expression of force or energy he generates through the physical plane activities, especially toward others. This is learning to tame the lower will. And I'll be talking about the will extensively in next month's talk. Also, leaders should be practicing truth-telling. This directly relates to the right use of speech and imparting truth and being transparent in all that this individual expresses through the medium of voice and the media. We can see that this relates to seed groups 2, the trained observers, and seed group 5, the political organizers. I'll be talking about this also in next month's talk. When the service worker embraces these commandments, he becomes the caretaker of his own evolution and thus influences his environment. The service worker uses will as a focused energy, as the force for good, for fulfilling group purpose in the world. Their influence causes a refinement in society's psyche, thereby causing the lower substance of conflict and separativeness to come to the surface and to be redeemed. We note that all movements in history originated as a thought form and became objectified into outer world expression as practiced right human relations. Movements such as the Black Lives Matter, Me Too movement, neutralizing violence against women and children, protecting the environment through action and legislation. Also, this can be anybody demanding transparency and truth-telling as solicited by fact checkers in the media. They are all responding to the higher subjective ideas or concepts that are waiting to become externalized. At this point, does anybody have any questions or comments?
I don't see any yet.
Okay, great. Let's continue. So seed group 4, educators in the new age. Future educators will teach how to become a transmitter of the two aspects of divine energy, namely knowledge and wisdom of what civilization has to offer. Their initial objective will be to prepare people for esoteric training by developing higher values such as cooperation and goodwill, and neutralize any form of separatism. In addition, the educator's goals would be to teach peace and to bridge the gap between the lower mind and the soul. This would result in education to become oriented toward the mindset of thinking of peace in all parts of life, such as the social media, economic, cultural, and political spheres. Further teachings would be for the educators to work with Seed Group 5, the political organizers, and address the root causes of poverty, hunger, separation, and hate. So we're starting to see how the seed groups can work together and how it's important that they don't just work in isolation. Esoteric education would train the student in knowing that it is the soul who is the motivating influence behind all events and how the individual must integrate with it. That the mind begins to function as a bridge, a channel of energy and communication between the plan as it exists in the conscious intent of hierarchy and world affairs as they must change and adapt to planetary purpose as a solution held by hierarchy. Thus, the disciple cooperates in the task of establishing the thought form of solution and also trains him or herself for active service in human affairs. I'll expand on this a little bit later shortly when I talk about world discipleship. A higher objective of the educator will be to build the Antakarana for linking the higher mind and with the personality and with the soul into a functioning and integrated whole. This will establish a group Antakarana ultimately between man's mental plane and the hierarchy. New Age education will work along the lines of culture and provide character building and the meaning of right human relations from birth. The individual will practice self-discipline and learn about right application of energy and personal will as a force. The student will learn how to appropriately deal with and learn to transmute energies of fear, anger, and selfish behavior. Besides academic and intellectual training, education must prepare youth in transcending anything that causes separation between people. Here's a quote from Immanuel Kant in 1784. He's a philosopher of the 18th century Enlightenment movement. And he basically said, the public use of reason must at all times be free. This was not simply a matter of free speech of the right to say whatever one might be thinking at any one given time. It was rather about the obligation of the learned person to carry knowledge to the reading public, to inspire his fellow man, and to realize his own intellectual capacities. According to Kant, the free and public exercise of reason alone can deliver enlightenment to humankind. This suggests that it is the responsibility of our leaders in government, education, and the media to foster this mindset. So it becomes a combined effort of these other seed groups. And here is our familiar image of the 7 planes of our solar system, where humanity currently dwells, basically on the lower 18 subplanes here. I'm moving my cursor, and I hope everybody can see it. Can you?
Yes, we can.
See it? Excellent. Okay, so we understand the majority of humanity dwells in lower 18 subplanes, and here we have Well, actually, the lower sub 18 begin approximately here, and it goes down to the physical plane here. I have it off the chart a little bit. Basically, this is just showing that the top of the astral plane, the mental plane, going into the spiritual triad. So, as I said, the majority of humanity dwells at the lower 18 subplanes, and that's the at the feeling of lower mental, which is the concrete mind right here, the lower concrete mind. And we also have the astral plane right here. So this is basically a stage of unknowingness by humanity, knowing that they don't, the idea that they don't have concept of the soul necessarily, and that they can make a higher connection with the higher planes here. With we in the Moria Federation, the Theosophy, other esoteric groups, and other spiritual groups too, they know that they can make a higher connection with the higher self, which we're calling the soul. And so the major goal for future educators to accomplish will be to bring people consciously, particularly our youth, onto the path of evolution. Now, this is evolution saying, I, the individual, am aspiring toward becoming like my pure spirit. Whereas the forces of involution say that let's stay focused right here on the lower 18 subplanes and focus on the materialism, let's just stay with materialism only in the form nature. Let's not even aspire toward anything higher. That's a very simple way of saying it. So by working on the path of evolution, through meditation, spiritual study, and service, which I'm throwing in there for the just understanding and connection, you basically learn to connect you, the personality. You see your mental, emotional, and physical self. You see them as one unit and connecting with your higher self, the soul. So what you do is you see yourself, I am the soul, and say, I want to connect with the spiritual triad. Well, you do this in meditation. It takes months and years to do, perhaps even lifetimes. So in so doing, you're building a bridge here. This dotted line right here, that's the Antakarana. This is all symbolic, of course, imagery, but it's essentially what you do in consciousness. And by connecting with this, the higher mind, the higher manas, or the higher mental aspect is your soul. So by connecting through the soul, using the abstract mind, which is, I got it right up here. It's basically here. You're basically crossing your personality, your soul integrated personality. It's crossing the space here and connecting with the spiritual triad, which is the highest level of the soul or manas. And there you're wanting to allow buddhi, or this higher spiritual essence, to come into you and purify your lower 18 subplanes nature. And this energy coming from buddhi or even higher will replace ultimately the astral energy that's in your astral body. You regime it. Regiming it is basically uplifting the matter. It will help regime the chakras that you have, and it'll purify the body and do a lot of healing work too. This takes place over a long period of time. So this is a major goal of future educators, is to focus on this. I'll talk a little bit more about this when we get to the esoteric schools. So by creating this Antakarana, it will cause the mind and the astral body to be conditioned or redeemed by the energies of love, wisdom, and pure reasoning from buddhi, or from the plane of the intuition. This is the science of redemption. And you'll be redeeming the lower astral matter and with the higher buddhi substances I mentioned. Here, buddhi replaces the lower astral tendencies such as reactivity with becoming responsive in a mental response type of activity. So instead of emotionally coming from only an emotional place and I'm reacting to this situation, oh, I hate this, as opposed to say, oh, well, I'm not sure I really like this or don't like this, but I'm coming more from a thinking capacity as opposed to the emotional reactivity. So buddhi also enables right character building, which I'll talk about shortly. So does anybody have any comments or questions about this?
I don't see anything yet.
All right. I will continue moving on. The tasks of future educators. In the present form, the work of the fourth seed group is concerned with the education of the masses, regardless of the country, and serves to educate the individual to function within a competitive and materialistic culture. The Tibetan indicates that the educator's work is along the lines of culture, and that's from Dina 1. And DK says that educating the middle classes is important in order that they become molders of public opinion. That is, they begin to function on the mental plane and make more informed decisions. Largely, humanity is really coming from the emotional place. And this is why people can be easily manipulated through advertising, political rhetoric, and persuasion, going back literally centuries. For the immediate task of educators in the New Age, from externalization of the hierarchy, DK says, there will be found a vast number of people who are painfully and infinitely slow in their processes and evolving out of their animal instinctual nature into that of human beings with an awakening conscience, and they have an urge to betterment and who can respond to simple educational processes when available. They are the product of the slow-moving influences of life and matter itself. So in this way, instinct can become blended or resolved into its higher expression, the intellect, leading to the intuition. This would help offset the problem of economic disparity, where the underprivileged do not have access to education, or particularly the higher education, due to economic circumstances. So I'll be talking about this today more, the idea that to bring the masses, educate the masses so they start becoming thinking and knowledgeable about political affairs, social affairs, and understanding. We're seeing this happen in today's world, although there's still lots of people who are manipulating them in the direction they want them to go. I try to say that as neutral as possible, where there's obviously lots of potential for interesting talk there. With an uneven, they're doing the educators are making, they're observing that there's an uneven development of the mental plane, that there's a cleavage that's been created across all cultures. And it is the ordinary intelligent people who are educated under the mass systems of the present time who are able to occasionally to think and rise to address mental emergencies. So there is change happening in society. And of course, some of this was written 80 years ago by Alice Bailey and DK, but it still is very current today. So many of these people who are easily manipulated or easily not as educated, they are not yet highly cultured, but constitute the so-called general public, which we designate by the words upper and lower middle class. Education of this group may be stimulated by the inflow of light and wisdom, and thus constitute a bridging group between the upper and lower and middle classes. This stimulating process will make of its members cultural aspirants with a new sense of values, with a recognition of spiritual objectives, and with a developed ability to make them the molders of public opinion. So it's basically taking people who are very, very strongly emotionally oriented, uplifting their education, bringing more intellectual understanding, and therefore helping them make more informed decisions. They will then be the most important group, according to DK, expressing the culture of the new age, and will be the standard of values for the masses. With those who are stronger with the evolutionary urge and mental plane development processes, such as hierarchy and the highly intelligent and educated, DK says they will lift up and heal by their own inclusiveness. In this example, the greater group can always include the lesser and thus help bridge all gaps. So by those people who are able to lift themselves up from the emotional to the intellectual to the more mental understanding, they can help uplift other people because they will see problems in a different light and help remedy situations on the physical plane. Any questions or comments at this point?
Nope, not yet.
All right. Continuing, a child's formative years. In today's world, there are many educational approaches on how to raise a child socially and intellectually, such as Jean Piaget's Stages of Cognitive Development and the Waldorf School, founded by Rudolf Steiner in the early 20th century. Both are from an understanding of human development that address the needs of the growing child. Now, when I put this together, I also put this in my book. I listed the stages of cognitive development by Piaget, and that's much more detailed. I'm not going into the detail here. Many of you are quite possibly already familiar with that. And the Waldorf School is, I'm just using that as an example of a current method in today's world of how a school could be so designed to help the child in their character development. At the Waldorf School, the formative years are from ages 1 through 7. The child is identified as motivated by instinct and desire. He learns early on how to master his physical body and refine his motor movements. During this time, the very young child is taught the most rudimentary forms of will and how to harness it in a constructive manner. Through various activities, the child develops the skill to socially and cognitively interact with others, which mimic forces in the outside world. In the next phase, approximately ages 7 to 14, the child engages the feeling nature of his astral body. This is all from the Waldorf School, and this is all put down by Rudolf Steiner. The child may feel a range of emotions from sadness to joy, and how to manage these in the context of seeing the beauty in all things and in people. Children are encouraged to use a meaningful way to approach their maturing feeling nature while simultaneously experiencing their developing conceptual and thinking capacity. For the last stage of child development, ages 14 to 21, the child or the student is ready to use his mind critically and consciously work with his thoughts and beliefs. His ability to think abstractly, learn to search for truth, and develop a sense of justice, and to compare both sides of a story, such as weighing the pairs of opposites, as we say in esotericism, and this will all begin at this stage. During all of these stages for the new education, the child is taught what it means to be a human being and act responsibly in all his actions. All the while, he is integrating academics and developing the capacity for critical thinking. In these formative years, when the boy or the girl is learning right from wrong, that is rudimentary discrimination and discernment, and how to get along with others and the principles of sharing. These are all foundations of right human relations. And during this time, they will learn methods that will help the child develop a healthy attitude toward his world and towards humanity as a whole. With a sound and well-rounded education, the child will grow up as a citizen, not of their country or culture per se, but will recognize his responsibility as an active member of the local and world community, while embodying humanity's best values. This is a challenge for not only service workers in the educational professions, but for those in politics and psychology as well. New curriculum would be presented by those whose hearts and minds see a vision for the fulfillment of what is best for the future generations to come. The emphasis of modern knowledge and intellectual development present in the 21st century must give way to an upbringing of education that will emphasize moral character building and world citizenship. So this is basically the child would be learning how to become a citizen of the world in essence. I'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to the concept of world citizenship or world discipleship. From a worldview perspective, it could be argued that the conflicts in every nation and that every level of world civilization exist because children are not taught, number one, to respect their fellow brothers and sisters. This destructive orientation literally goes on from generation to generation, culture to culture, and is largely teaching about the emotional astral body and its development. The principle of right human relations is missing from the curriculum or not emphasized. In the affairs of finance, economics, politics, science, social interrelations, and media, to name a few, how many conflicts could have been avoided by practicing cooperation and goodwill? They'll also be talking about methods of thinking for successful and cooperative living. And they'll be talking about understanding about developing the mental body and its use and understanding the rudimentary aspects of the plan. This teaching will show we are already unified as one human family and that we are in cooperation with the various kingdoms as an integral part of the web of life. Through wise understanding, we can get to the root of all problems and create a scenario for lasting peace, establishing cooperation between all peoples and the environment. This will only happen through right mental alignment with the soul by those people who can use their minds for the benefit of all, and not the selfish few. In today's world, education has failed to prevent continual poverty, crime, drug abuse, violence, and the clamor for money and power. Why is this? Because we are all taught to compete, take from others for our own selfish benefit, and not share our abundance with the greater whole. It is not known if money will be part of the new age, but the principle of sharing would be taught, understood, and practiced. Educating the most disadvantaged and underprivileged children in impoverished communities and underdeveloped countries around the world will teach their essential humanity so that they can creatively participate in civilization. This is a humanistic ideal with the intent to expose the student to a spiritual and subjective program. When the child is educated, he will be exposed to information which will expand his mind and allow for the inflow of the light of knowledge. Are there any comments at this point or questions?
Nope.
No? Okay. Character building and developing right relationships. Education in the new age will place the highest priority on developing the meaning of right human relations in each person. From early childhood, the individual is taught his value that he is an integral part of the one humanity and that he would have the responsibility to build and contribute towards the promotion of good relationships and be part of law-abiding community where right human relations are valued and respected. To attain this attitude and reach this understanding, early training must involve learning for the child to appropriately deal with and transmute the energies of fear, anger, and selfish behavior. The individual will learn to practice self-discipline and about the right application of the will as a force. For kindergarten to through high school students. This involves teaching about anti-bullying behavior, dealing with peer pressure, and neutralizing any tendencies toward violence and drugs, and help them with goal setting. Learn to teach the student how to eliminate anything in the individual's nature that causes separation. To offset the spirit of competition. In today's society, the spirit of competition, almost without exception, drives people to compete against each other in clamoring for a better job, for more money, the potential for self-centered aggressive behavior, political ambition, etc., such as we see with violence that are in our society. Educational objectives should prepare the youth for eliminating the competitive spirit and teach the spirit of cooperation, goodwill, and tolerance. Education around relationships also deals with teaching the value of global awareness and world citizenship. The student's training will improve all social events and organizations for which he's associated. Eventually, he can be exposed to elements of the esoteric education where he is trained in knowing that it is the soul who is the motivating influence behind all events and how he must integrate with it. He must learn to prepare the education must learn to prepare the individual for developing higher values and teaching the education for peace and bridge the gap between the lower mind and with the soul. Education can also teach about the law of rebirth to help offset uncontrolled responses of the sex urge, desire, and the unthinking procreation of children. From the standpoint of hierarchy, this contributes to world economic difficulties and national aggression, ultimately. From the practices of mindfulness taught by Thich Nhat Hanh, disengagement with the world is not encouraged, but with these, it can lead one towards compassionate action, such as practicing oneness to others' viewpoints and sharing material resources with those in need. Over the last 20 or so or 30 years, mindfulness practices have entered the corporate environments, political offices, parenting guides, and even medical insurance carriers who encourage the patient to have an intelligent approach to their own health through a balanced diet and stress reduction techniques. The challenge and crisis equals spiritual opportunity. As the student progresses in his education, he must learn that any challenges, any barriers and crises in his life should be treated as spiritual opportunities, and that life's problems should be approached with an open heart and mind. This is best done by rendering service to the community through goodwill and loving understanding, and being able to adapt to life's changing circumstances with intelligence and respect. This will naturally lead in the long run to a spiritually educated individual who can become a better citizen by being the backbone for expressing culture in the coming age.
David.
Yes, please go on.
Solandria asks, can there be healthy competition that can be in agreement to cooperate? Many do not have the Waldorf environment available to them.
No, they do not. That's correct. Competition, I'm basically using that in the way it's used in a materialistic or capitalistic culture where you compete for a job, you compete to get to the next level or something. You certainly can have a loving or positive competition, like when you're in grade school on the playground and you're playing games of each other, and you're not necessarily trying to crush or destroy the other person. You're just trying to cooperate and learn how to be physically working with the ball game you're playing with, or you're learning with exercise, or you're learning to cooperate with your other brothers and sisters there on the playground. So it can be done in a positive environment, but that the adult the adult understanding must be driving that understanding to that higher level of competition, which can take place. In a certain way, when you're aspiring toward evolving your own consciousness. For example, I want to connect with my soul. Well, I'm competing with the difficulties in my own personal environment where I have distractions, and the distractions act as a competition that I'm, so to speak, moving towards and moving through and away from or beyond. And so it's a whole evolution there on that level. So I am my own guide in that way, my own teacher. So that's another positive use of competition. But generally, the use of competition that we have in today's world will be transcended by learning cooperation and goodwill, and that will cause people to want to participate. But it's up to the teacher, him or herself, that can radiate that type of energy.
Kim Knight pretty much reiterates what you've just said. She says we turn competition into cooperation. Competition is one of the fundamental unhealthy patterns of consciousness of humans, and it has to be transcended.
That is right. Any other questions or comments?
Donnie says, any thoughts on children practicing meditation?
Well, I guess we're initially talking about education, quote, for the masses, regular academic you see in a public school, academic teaching, high school, university. They don't usually talk about meditation. That's a specialized thing you can find in some type of personal orientation, perhaps your parents, the child's parents, or maybe a teacher can pull the child aside, but that is not typically taught in today's mainstream culture, especially with certain religious groups who are, let's just say, adverse to that understanding. I won't say any more on that, but it's just that only would happen really at the individual level. If the child could have after-school activities, they could participate in some type of community activity. Perhaps it can be done through a church activity. They could have also meditation. They may call it prayer work. It's a similar energy there. But of course, meditation is directly connecting with our higher self. Yes, it is coming, and meditation is also being taught. It is recognized in the media at a public level. You have meditation in the Pentagon. This is going back to the 1980s. I don't know what's current with that, but that is off and on. I've heard that happening. It certainly can be in public places. In the office, it's encouraged in places when people's off time. So it can happen in many, many places in a secular environment.
And then Salandria says, so the group 4 soul group comes in to assist with this evolvement.
I don't understand.
I think that's relating to the competition.
Oh, I see.
And transcending it to cooperation.
Okay, sure, yeah. But
then
the concept of cooperation will become successfully taught and practiced as much as the teacher embodies that energy. If he or she embodies the energy of cooperation and goodwill, let's work together. Let's not compete against each other. Let's work together toward a common goal. Let's finish this project together, etc. That as much as that person radiates that, then other people will see that as a positive force for change. Go ahead, Bill.
Joanne says some schools do teach mindfulness training as part of social and emotional education.
Sure. I mean, that's the practices of mindfulness taught by Thich Nhat Hanh. Yeah, those have definitely entered the mainstream mentality in the last 20 or 30 years. So that's great. And as much as students, I would imagine that might even be part of some bullying training, anti-bullying practices and training that people can learn also. I can imagine that being part of a curriculum in today's world too.
Okay, I think Oh, Joanne adds cooperative or group learning has been around since the 1980s in the American education system.
Excellent. Yes, that sounds great. That's very true.
And I think that's all we've got for right now.
All right, let's move on then. Teaching new ideals. I've stated that a major objective of future educators will be develop man's intellect for becoming a transmitter of two different aspects of divine energy, namely knowledge and wisdom. To make this happen, a realignment in our educational system and processes are necessary. This will result in a readjustment of our present concepts and practices of education so that the light of knowledge and the benefits which develop from it have penetrated to those people who are not strongly guided or driven by emotional reactivity or the evolutionary urge. So in many ways, this type of concept will be taught to help offset the emotional reactivity or the emotional urge. Not to downplay emotions, it's just learn how to use them intelligently.
David?
Yes.
Marina added meditation needs an evolved being. Before being mental, we are emotional, and then we just pray. And prayer has many stages, from egotistic, just asking for myself and family, then you pray for humanity. After prayer, then comes meditation as a way of life.
Yes, I think that's a great description. Meditation also infers a intelligent approach toward connecting with spirit, an intelligent approach connecting with the spirit, the soul, intelligent approach toward how am I going to resolve these problems in myself, my sense of I'm not getting along with other people, or how do I resolve this in myself. So I definitely can see that. Initially, you want to transcend your own personality, the needs of David. I only have my own need. I don't care what your needs are. I just care about mine. So therefore, I'm going to use whatever energies I have to get what I want. We want to offset that, obviously. And so I need to learn to offset that. So therefore, through character building and certain educational techniques, I learn I can be devoted toward a higher ethic or a higher, perhaps a teaching, and that's a devotional energy there. And I can do spiritual study for that too. So there's all that happening there with that. And then you evolve toward making a connection. You learn through spiritual study also to connect with higher self. So that there's all a strong connection there. So that's a great thought. Thank you. We understand that higher education could be the means for teaching those methods which relate a human being to the world of souls and the world of inner values, as I just said, with other human beings. So you learn to work with your own energies, and that you learn, as you learn to work with your own energies, such as through meditation, you also learn that others have these similar difficulties and processes which they go to too. And so you can learn empathy because of that. New Age education will center on teaching new ideals, developing the individual's character, and instilling the meaning of right human relations and ethics from birth. DK tells us the goal should be to shift from only studying our past, but with a consideration for the future. Through education, the everyday person will have an awakening conscience here in the present and the urge to bettering themselves for the future. So from this, if we're studying the past, education should teach people that history is a timeline of the failures and successes of communication. They should learn to dwell upon how right human relations could have changed outcomes and what people did in history, and learn from certain events, certain significant events. DK also tells us that after a realignment of the educational systems and processes, the educator's initial objective will be to train people for esoteric training and for developing higher values such as cooperation and goodwill, and teaching education for peace, as I mentioned before. Esoteric education would train the student in knowing that it is the soul who is the motivating influence behind all events, and that he must learn to integrate with it. I'll talk about this shortly in the coming esoteric schools. A higher objective of the educator will be able to build the Antakarana, as I mentioned before, and to use the mind in meditation for linking the lower mind of the personality with the soul into a functioning and related integrated whole. And this will eventually help to establish a group Antakarana, because many people are sharing in the same activity. They'll connect with the higher group on a level of telepathy, and they'll be attracted to different groups. And so this will be connecting with larger group activity in relation to the hierarchy for manifesting the plan. This new training would influence all of the seed groups with the immediate focus on political science, economics. Eventually, their work will prepare people for esoteric training, education for peace, and help bridge the gap between the lower mind and the soul. I mentioned world discipleship. Is there any more comments or questions as I go on?
No, not at this time.
All right. In Dino 1, Discipleship New Age, Volume 1, DK said, a man becomes a world disciple in the technical sense when the vision is to him an important and a determining fact in his consciousness, and one to which all his daily efforts are subordinated. He needs no one to reveal the plan to him. He knows. His sense of proportion is adjusted to the revelation of his life, and is dedicated to bring the vision into factual existence. This is the notion that education should teach the individual to develop a sense of synthesis within all humanity. This would develop an understanding of the bonds of relationship. First, to know his immediate family, but his vision should extend to embracing the larger community, the nation, and eventually all humanity. This would instill good citizenship and a sense of responsibility for the community. World discipleship is also a term that Alice Bailey used to describe the goal of students of the Arcane School and students of esoteric study. That is, for people to join the Arcane School, it's the idea for becoming a world disciple. The concept of world discipleship is about, if the disciple is so inclined, he or she would prepare and train for service in a larger global context and not just within the local community. The masters are occupied with forming new groups of disciples within existing seed groups who can be integrated into existing groups and be available for world service. The concept of world service must be approached mentally and not emotionally. World servers are driven by a finer set of values, such as cooperation, goodwill, synthesis, and work with divine indifference with consecration to the plan. Disciples eliminate all of hate and the sense of separateness to enable right human relations and the evocation of goodwill. This will produce a general attitude to clear the way for needed right adjustments in society. And this process is the same as self-purification. Self-purification, we talk about, is generally on the individual level, but we also have the individual national self-purification that needs to take place. Just look at the political conditions of the country, and you will see self-purification definitely has a appropriate work here. World servers will also work through silence and self-forgetfulness with constant soul radiation. That meaning that they will connect with their higher self and so radiate that concept outward. This evokes the activity for carrying the plan to the next step. Disciples work with non-self-assertion and not by imposition of their own ideas. Using the intuition, disciples would work with techniques of invocation and evocation. They are sensitive to impression and carrying it out with the physical plane evocation. So they're sensitive to impression, which is the invocation, and carrying it out with the physical plane, which is evocation. Disciples project formulated thoughts, divine ideas and concepts, which embody the immediate plan for humanity. They are active focal points of the forces of light in the three worlds and found in all fields. The three worlds meaning mental, emotional, physical. And they're found in all fields, which means all seed groups too. World servers are training disciples in their orientation towards service of the plan and not personal progress. The disciples' obedience is to the growing recognition of the plan and not the master. This is achieved through an established rapport between soul and personality, disciple and master. A disciple becomes accepted when he starts subjectively climbing toward the vision of the plan and can consciously register what he has seen and begins constructive materialization towards this end. All his daily efforts must be subordinated. His life is dedicated to bringing the vision into factual existence with the group of which he's associated. And keep in mind again that this person working on world discipleship, working toward world discipleship, is not necessarily conscious in what we call an esoteric sense or an esoteric understanding. This person may not have that understanding whatsoever. They can be very skilled and very understanding and working on a higher level without necessarily having esoteric vocabulary or understanding. So from this, a disciple's thoughts are conditioned, number one, by its power, which is based on right understanding and interpretation of ideas through spiritual insight. Number two, his thoughts by its purity, based on clear vision, unimpeded flow by soul from soul source, from the soul force. And the thought life is watched with care as to its potency, increased by purity, and adds to the pool of thought via telepathy, which all disciples can be reported to use. And the disciples' thoughts are conditioned by number three, by its correct precipitation of thought due to clearly directed intent and intelligent participation in the master's creative activity. So this would be more connected at the ashramic level, or using the intuition to know where to direct one's activity. Any thoughts on that? Comments?
I don't see any yet.
All right. Esoteric training in the New Age. The ageless wisdom teachings state that with the reappearance of the Christ and the externalization of the hierarchy, they will create the new esoteric schools. Information on the physical building and the structure and what they'll look like is described in some detail in Alice Bailey's book, Letter in Occult Meditation. Since none of us are masters in setting up a curriculum and training for would-be students, in this section, I will be speculating on what would be taught and who would be attending. So speculation on what might be part of a basic outline of some of the different levels of teachings. There, for regular education, there would be preschool through university training. Besides learning basic academics, the students would engage in right character building with emphasis on building right human relations and eliminating any form of separatism, teachings and the concept of brotherhood of world citizenship. For first initiation training, the Tibetan described individuals and large groups could take the first initiation in the New Age. This would be based upon the individual being ready and take some type of test or evaluation to determine eligibility and readiness. This could be possibly involve advanced service workers or initiates clairvoyantly seeing how well a person's subjective infusion, soul infusion, and integration are developed and their connection with their soul and spiritual triad. The would-be service worker might be required to participate in some service-related activities, either subjective or physical, or both. This would help him or her to establish inner soul connections and prepare the individual for future spiritual evolution. For initiate training, you've heard the term, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. This is a term attributed to Shakyamuni Buddha in the Theosophical Origins. This idea will bring about both student and teacher together for advancement to the next step of spiritual evolution, initially on the inner planes, and becoming an accepted disciple. And an accepted disciple was one of the stages of discipleship that GK talked about. I believe that was in Discipleship, Age New, Volume 1. I describe that in my book also. Through some type of test or evaluation, students would be accepted to work with an initiate or a master in preparation for the next major initiation. Activity would be not just for advancing an individual's spiritual evolution, but preparing him or her for leadership in one of the 10 seed groups and for helping to advance the plan. For initiate training, the student would work by negating glamour and illusion on the mental plane using the equivalent of the technique of light, which we have in Glamour's World Problem. This might also include meditating on self-purification on deep levels of the subconscious. Other training might involve developing the Ajna Center for opening the third eye for greater telepathic capacity. Initiation is partly a process of continuing integration into the centers of force from the master's group at the ashramic level, and not the result of any training received from the master. So the initiate training in an esoteric school, students would prepare to take the second, third, fourth, or fifth initiations. A third degree initiate or above would work directly with the master, perhaps with the monad, in facilitating their own inner evolution. Initiate training would require the student to learn and demonstrate control of inner energies, such as establishing a continuity of consciousness and holding the mind steady in the light. The teachings could revolve around the concepts of identification. This relates to the individual through meditation. He learns to hold his consciousness with the threefold personality and the soul together as one unit as they move toward fusion or at one-ment. This is an awareness of unity, but he realizes that complete identification with the whole must be comprehended at the Buddhic plane level without thought or with the separate I awareness. So obviously this is advanced work. As the teaching on identification progresses, this will directly impact the initiate's personal life, and he will naturally become more engaged in service, with the soul firmly directing the student's higher mind, or perhaps the monad, if he's a third level or initiate or above. It'll be guiding his higher mind and personality. The lower mind will become a vehicle of the soul for service. Certainly at that point, the spiritual triad, the energies of Buddhi would be purifying the lower 18 subplanes considerably. Certainly the student will be learning the difference between knowledge and wisdom. This applies for all the regular education, all the way through initiate training. We know that knowledge is information that is transmitted through speech and symbols. Symbols are obtained when you're in deep meditation through the abstract mind. Any subjective communication will happen by the soul, by the guides, or a master. Wisdom will grow in the individual through soul contact, such as through meditation and spiritual study. Through these, the Antakarana is built, and the personality's wisdom grows according to him to be able to contact the soul and the spiritual triad. Also, that keep in mind that the Antakarana starts being built at the probationary stage, where the student is beginning his or her purification stage and learning to connect with the soul. As to other training, GK points out in Education in the New Age, the Alice Bailey's book, Education in the New Age, why omit political research from the spiritual curriculum? The new esotericism deems it to be of equal, if not greater importance than the activity of the churches, governments that condition people and aid in the production of any current civilization, forcing the masses of men into certain needed lines of thought. So the interest in politically related events should not be omitted from a spiritual curriculum. See, we're talking about, once again, here in an esoteric school. As esotericists, we know that the inner causes of war and conflict in our civilization are a result of individuals that are abusing the energy of will and are not practicing the energies of harmlessness and goodwill. I will certainly be addressing these ideas in detail in next month's talk, Seed Group 5, the political organizers. So it is incumbent on educators that they provide an essential and intelligent understanding of right government processes, such as working with the Seed Group 5, the political organizers, and the individual should participate in it where possible. Also, it is the task of the religious field, Seed Group 6, the religious workers, to instill higher spiritual values in people. Any comments or ideas on this? Anybody?
I don't see anything yet.
All right. Okay, let's continue then. In the previous slide, I emphasized training in a broad sense. Esoteric schools and students would, at a minimum, most likely develop the personality and soul alignment and integration. The student will learn to decentralize the personality and learn the importance of establishing a brain-mind-soul alignment. By doing so, he will become aware that it is the soul he initially connects with, and later the solar angel or the monad. The student will learn to directly connect with the spiritual triad via the soul, of course, through meditation, and learn about subjective realms and the development of the intuition. They will learn to consciously and visually develop the Antakarana or build the Antakarana. They will learn to master occult meditation and consciously build the Antakarana, which will directly aid in this process. This type of connection will bring the brain, the abstract mind, and the soul in relation to each other to create a direct link with the plane of the intuition of the spiritual triad. As the light of the soul pours into the brain, the mind of the student will transform over time and will take on attributes and values of the soul. The student will learn about the constitution of man and the 49 planes of our solar system, or of our physical plane. They'll learn about the etheric body and its functions. Using specific techniques, they'll have obtain an understanding about prana, visualization, and the use of breathing exercises. And as we know, if breathing exercises are not used properly, they can cause physical, emotional, and mental damage to the person, but they can also enhance and expand the consciousness too. So that's why I personally advocate, if you're going to use breathing exercises, use them under some type of study or working with a student, a teacher that you understand and that you trust. They will learn to develop telepathy to connect with other group members on the inner planes on subjective levels. They will work in meditation at the conscious unfoldment of the egoic lotus. And of course, when you're talking about meditation, you're talking about going into deep levels here. You're talking about working in conscious unfoldment of the egoic lotus. This is an advanced process, and certainly the person will have stilled their lower self of reactivity. and they will purify themselves considerably at this point. Other advanced teachings will revolve around understanding the fires of the mind, about the nature of fire, that is, from manas, fohat, electric, vital in the etheric body, the vital fires in the etheric body, such as in the centers of the chakras. They'll learn about the science of invocation and evocation, which I alluded to before. These are already practiced by the masses through the power of prayer, excuse me, chanting mantras and the words of power and their proper use. I'll discuss this more when we get to Seed Group 6 on religion and the approach to divinity and the hierarchy. Also, advanced teachings will revolve around making a successful interconnection with the higher mind, with the soul. The student will learn how to master the work of the observer, learn about discernment and discrimination in consciousness to determine the purity of ideas and impressions. This will help the student draw upon the resources of the soul and gain a control of the mental body. Students will be taught the importance of establishing a regular spiritual practice consisting of meditation, spiritual study, and service. This is how this would provide a sound foundation for life. An important question for the student to ask is, why do I need a spiritual practice? There are many possible answers for this. Here is a couple of possibilities. Having a spiritual practice will help balance the mental and help the emotional and the thought form life by allowing the soul's energies to stabilize the etheric and astral bodies in subtle ways, just by its contact. If the student knows the specific energies or forces are shaping his life, such as within his own sphere, why not exert some conscious control and allow for the higher aspect of the soul to be the guide? Study the energies and the forces present by being vigilant in consciousness. This is becoming the observer. This is being the observer. The student will come to know his purpose in the world and not just to evolve his own soul and personal processes. So this is a study for the student of evolution, and certainly not on I'm spiritually just expanding my own consciousness so I can become more powerful and influence people. No, this is not what it's about. It's for spiritual evolution and help in service and helping to participate in society and uplift according to the plan. And according to the plan, the student must learn to help humanity grow into more prosperous and a creative civilization. In many ways, he is already doing this, but is not united with others with a common purpose. This can result in greater inefficiency and abuse of energy. This brings in the concept of effective service, which can be more efficient with right alignment with the soul. The individual will learn to train the mind for service. Through alignment and integration with the soul, there'll be wise solutions can be had, be more easily forthcoming. By doing this, the student will learn how the mind and the three vehicles, the etheric body and the soul, work together to allow for right understanding of the energies and the forces involved. Any comments or questions at this point?
No, I don't see anything.
Right.
Oh, wait a minute.
Yes, go ahead.
Tia says, do we have an understanding of when this type of teaching and education will be available in the Aquarian age? It is hard to fathom this type of education, energy assessments of potential students being possible without an externalized hierarchy.
Yeah, I completely agree, because with the hierarchy, their priorities will be manifesting the plan. And right now, as separative nations, separative teaching and curriculum and students, and everything is separative in today's world, or a large part of it. And that's a part of that has to do with the religious training. There are separate religious schools to become Catholic, to be Jewish, to be Islamic. to be Buddhist or whatever. And people they want to think only along those levels. Nothing seems to be pulling everything together. No particular teaching. So it really would take somebody of a high mental functioning status, i.e. a initiate or master, to pull this whole concept together into one focused energy to help develop civilization, to help progress civilization to the next level. That is the level of evolution. And so it definitely is incumbent on the masters to be physically present. I won't say it can't be done by people the way it is today, but I don't really know of anybody that has that mental capacity to sway people and to show them that simply says, we need to have spiritual education, focusing people and pull them all together. I would see nothing but tremendous disagreement with that in today's world. And so we really need to have spokespersons who can help bridge that whole concept that we need to be working together as humanity and not separative cultures, religions, or nations. We need to be together. So I hope that helps answer the question there.
Kim says that some of these teachings are already available today. There are schools evolving already with enlightened masters. Yuan Tze, Suni Murti, and many more.
Yes, that's correct. There are many schools that are that are outside of mainstream education. So I have to use that term. They are outside, and then there's, of course, there's parents who are self-teaching, or they're teaching their own children. So there's that is happening, but mainstream education from preschool, kindergarten up to the university level are not teaching these broad esoteric concepts. They're teaching some elements of it, saying we must work together in cooperation only on certain rudimentary levels, but it is not a mainstream idea. I mean, here in the United States, many of the textbooks that are written through are written by people that are focused through religious study, and so they have a bias and they're putting it into the curriculum. So that has been happening for quite a long time, and so certain curriculum is not taught, certain orientations are taught, certain biases are taught from that. So this is all breeding competition and separativeness, and so we obviously have to get past this. And but schools, there are schools, esoteric schools, that are working in the world, like, for example, the Arcane School. I believe I'm going to mention that a little bit later here. I'm going to be bringing that up as shortly. Some of the schools that are working to offset that separative mindset. Are there any other questions?
Yes. Joe says, one can use what you know currently to begin. People are attracted to specific studies, astrological services, or a beginning, for example. And then Kim says the big missing piece is the connection with soul and spirit, which is not yet taught in schools.
I'm gonna address those shortly. Certainly, astrology is only taught by individual personal interest, or perhaps you have a parent is teaching the child the rudiments of astrology, and certainly an esoteric school, an advanced esoteric school, will teach astrology also. Let me move on, and I'll get to those points shortly.
Okay, I have one more comment here, if I can read it. Huang says, I find the spiritual teaching in Christianity much closer to reality than in Buddhism. Or do I need to depend on the lesson of each soul of the past life for the soul to develop what they're taught?
Well, first of all, my understanding, or I would say that a person should approach, yes, Christianity has its values through the teaching of values, and community service in many ways. Buddhism has similar things too, as does Islam and Judaism. They all teach this, but they have their own particular dogma and understanding about how society should be or how you should run your life. And it really, in a general way, they are not directly connecting you with the higher spiritual self, the soul or higher. They do not connect you with God directly because they want to have their dogma driving you and how you should do your thing, how you should do your thing in meditation, how you should connect with higher self. That I see changing in the New Age, where some of the techniques that Christianity has, Buddhism has, Buddhism has mindfulness. Christianity has values, such as honesty and integrity and truth and honesty. These are very important values in Christianity that are taught. And some of these things will be adopted certainly as a very, very sound basis of a spiritual school or an esoteric school. Any
Okay,
more?
that's all we've got.
All right. So I'm going to move on to what's called the third dispensation of an esoteric teaching. And it's a speculation because in the latter part of the 19th century, we saw where Helena Blavatsky introduced spiritual and occult concepts on how life evolves in the individual all the way up to cosmic evolution. And through her teaching, which was written down in The Secret Doctrine in the late 1880s, it set the stage for a mental bridge to be built between the East and the West and between science and religion. HPB opened the door to the knowledge and the existence of the hierarchy as a living presence available for the guidance of modern humanity. She also emphasized the freedom of the human soul can happen by making such an approach. This was called, in retrospect, looking back, this was the first dispensation of the modern era. A generation later, from 1919, 1949, through Alice Bailey, in collaboration with the Tibetan master Waldorf, a second dispensation appeared. Together, they embarked on the venture of ultimately revealing spiritual and occult knowledge through the publication of 24 books on virtually every level of spirituality and wisdom. In effect, it was a continuation of Blavatsky's teachings, but with a greater occult and esoteric detail and depth. In esoteric astrology, Master GK assures us that we will be prepared for the new age of teachings. He said, the steps taken at the conclave in Shambhala in 1925, based on the tentative conclusion at the previous centennial conclave, a century before that, the pressures exerted by the hierarchy have proved most successful, and out of the chaos of the world war, which was precipitated by humanity itself, there is a structure of truth and a paralleling responsiveness of the human mechanism, which guarantees the perpetuation and rapid unfoldment of the next stage of the teaching of the ageless wisdom. So in essence, he's saying within the esoteric community, we do have the possibility for a third dispensation, and that humanity will not be without a new, as we come into the Aquarian era, we will not be without a new teaching and drive to move us forward. And within the esoteric community, there's a speculation about what the third dispensation of the teachings might be. And there certainly is no consensus. Many have speculated that Blavatsky was a fourth level initiate and Alice Bailey was a third level initiate. As this is idle speculation, it is strongly suggests that those who have not taken the higher initiations cannot have an idea of what the next teaching will be. In Dyna 2, Discipleship New Age Volume 2, GK says, hierarchical teachings and unfoldment consist of a sequence of revelations which are induced by man's recognition of subjective significances different from the usual apparent meanings. One of the most obvious signs of an emerging spiritual dispensation is the shift in human consciousness towards becoming more expansive in consciousness. What this era will reveal depends very much on the decision or decisions that are made now in the way that we respond to the challenges of the early 21st century and how we strive to manifest a more compassionate human society. While we may not necessarily disagree with this premise, we can at least consider a few ideas which could be part of a new teaching, new third dispensation. And here are some possibilities. There could be advanced teaching on the nature of synthesis and the seventh ray. This could be teachings on how the principles of how life and consciousness work together in combination with form to evolve mankind. For the 10 seed groups, teachings could be about synthesizing the various seed groups with each other and how they work together in combination or cooperation. There could be teachings on the expression of the will. In Rays and Initiations, DK says, when the avatar of synthesis comes, he will galvanize the three groups, the directing agents of Shambhala, the Nirmanakayas. The Nirmanakayas help to make man become and self-transform basically in consciousness, and the New World servers, and relate them to each other so that a new synthesis and alignment will be present on Earth. In essence, this great being, this avatar of synthesis, will act as a custodian of the will and thus create a basic triangle of force between the three major centers, hierarchy, humanity, and Shambhala, representing the planetary life. And I'll be talking about the nature and the expression of the will in detail in next month's talk, as I mentioned before, with the political organizers, Seed Group 5. For the third dispensation, there's a possibility advanced teachings. There could be advanced teachings in the nature of fire, which I mentioned before. The fire in a cosmic sense, vital, pranic, monastic, and electric. And this would be fundamentally about how the disciple or the initiate would learn how to merge the various fires in meditation. That certainly is an advanced teaching. There could be possibility of understanding how humanity together with the masters can seal the door where evil dwells, as we have in the fourth stanza in the Great Invocation. We may ask, how would evolution, their purpose and the plan, look like then? There's a hint in Rays and Initiations where the Tibetan says, a certain cosmic avatar will become conscious of the vibratory quality of the little point of light within the solar sphere, and then turn his gaze and send force, that is his will, into that point of light and cause cosmic evil to be driven out and find no more place on earth. That's in Rays and Initiations. There could also be a teaching on learning how to develop and use the mind to think in abstract terms. This could be visualizing symbols or contemplating abstract concepts for expanding that part of the mind and making it more functional for the soul and perhaps even ultimately for the monad. Besides our current esoteric understanding of evolution through the path of liberation, we can discover our true cosmic purpose on Earth. How are we connected with the extraplanetary and other star systems? What is our long-term destiny as a race, human race? There could be advanced teachings to indicate the long-term destiny as to move from the cosmic astral plane, where we are now, and move on to the cosmic mental plane and work in collaboration with the star system Sirius. DK also predicts an expansion of the teachings on esoteric astrology. Any comments or anybody want to add their own speculation?
I don't see anything yet.
All right. So let's talk a little bit about some accomplishments in education. Global education is a concept incorporated in the United Nations Charter and hundreds of institutions around the world, declaring that it is a human right for people, boys, girls, men, and women, to be taught the basics of reading, writing, and mathematics. It is also a concept centered around training of the fundamental truths of our humanity, the sharing and right application of knowledge so that a new civilization can be created. Here in the 21st century, with the advent of technology and social media, such as YouTube and even Zoom, these are common means for learning about how to do a process, how to use a device, or how to interact with a group, such as what I'm doing right now, such as we are doing right now. Generally speaking, the internet is widely available in many places around the world. This means that the global brain of knowledge is available 24/7 and increases the mental thinking capacity for the everyday person, not to mention the already highly educated. Mass education has spread internationally and has brought humanity closer to moving from an astral-only orientation to mentally engaging in life. We are learning more and more to think from our minds instead of our emotions. Concept of global education is of importance when the student is taught not just about how he interacts with people of his own culture, but is also taught about people from other countries, their culture, and a way of life. This helps to expand their awareness and expand on the concept of goodwill and cooperation amongst all people and groups and negate separatism. Prior to the pandemic, it was common for student exchanges between different countries to take place. These intercultural communications had also been happening with adults through cultural and professional exchanges between countries since the 1950s. I've spoken in some detail about the establishment of esoteric and occult schools for disciples in an online setting and future spiritual esoteric studies. Today, we have examples of esoteric schools which provide training in meditation, spiritual study, and service. And obviously, one that we have here is the Moria Federation Esoteric School. Through their various teachings and their weekly broadcasts. We have the Arcane School through the Lucis Trust. That is the school founded by Alice Bailey in the early 1920s, a century ago. It's basically an online school. It is not designed for being in person, just as the Moria Federation is not either. You work with a secretary or a mentor, and they help guide you in your spiritual education. And there's also other esoteric schools of the Theosophical Society of America, the esoteric section, and probably the Theosophical Society International, also out of Adyar, not to mention the other parts of the Theosophical Society, the United Lodge of Theosophy, and I believe the one in Los Angeles, which I think is just called School of Theosophy. I can't remember what they're called exactly. But anyhow, those are just three examples of esoteric schools in the world. I'm sure this audience probably knows of others. There's websites that are providing spiritually related activities, such as there's one called humanitiesstream.org, humanitiesstream.org. And they have teachings on conscious leadership, the integration of the lesser self, lower self with the higher self, helping people to deal with trauma or understand about it. And this is working with the work of Thomas Hubel. He's a German. He's been teaching this concept for a long time. If you can imagine, he's teaching about how the Holocaust has impacted the psyche of his own nation, Germany, and how people can get past the trauma of that. In addition, he also teaches about how the trauma of the Holocaust is not just something that took place in history. It is also registered on the etheric planes still existing in the world, and how this energy is felt and still can be felt. If you actually go visit a concentration camp, such as Dachau or Auschwitz, you will feel the energy there of some of the energy of what took place there. So the etheric energy is still very present. And Thomas Hubel's work, among others, are teaching about how to offset this tremendous trauma that still exists in the world. Greg Braden is also teaching this. He's a scientist, I believe he's a geologist also, and he's teaching concepts of science and spirituality and mixing them together, which is a fabulous combination. There's another organization called theshiftnetwork.com, and they have courses and trainings on personal and societal transformation. These are just a fraction of what's out there. I'm sure you have tremendous amount more of what could be. So does anybody have any comments or questions here at this point?
Yes. Tia says one such effort being made outside the esoteric context, but showing an effort to link educational institutions for group work, and she gave the link for it. ouiohe.org.
Okay.
It's in the chat.
Okay.
Anne says, how do we distinguish the true esoteric schools among others?
Okay, I would rephrase the question slightly. I say, how do you determine something which is esoteric or spiritual versus non-esoteric or spiritual? And that is certainly, you have to develop your own intuition to do that. And as DK said, or Alice Bailey said in the beginning of most of the blue books, basically says if the material feels right to you, keep studying it, otherwise put it down and move on to something else. That's a paraphrase, of course, but it's basically you develop yourself, you develop your mental and spiritual capacity through meditation, spiritual study and service. You develop that ability in yourself for discerning your relationship with teachings and understanding, your relationship with other groups, your relationship, and learn discernment and learn to know what feels right to you and go from there. Any other questions?
Yeah, I looked the website up that Tia gave us, and it's the Inter-American Organization for Higher Education. That's what that is. And then Kim says, what is the website? She couldn't find it. I think it was the one you were talking about.
Oh, the one I put out? Oh, there's the two I mentioned is the Shift Network. It's all one word together, theshiftnetwork.com. And the other one is, let's see, it's Humanities Stream. That's humanities with an S on the end, stream.org. Those are just two examples. And again, this talk, this PowerPoint presentation with my notes will be available on Makara very soon. So if you want any additional information about what I talked about in the detail, I always put a lot of detail in my talk. So certainly they'll be there on Makara pretty soon. So
okay, Kim says no, it was in reference to Thomas Hubel.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, so we're talking on the same level here. That's great. Okay, so are there any more comments or questions?
Did you hear me? She was looking for the website of Thomas Hubel.
Oh,
how is his name spelled? H-U-E-B-L-E?
I'm saying H-U-B-E-L.
Okay.
And the H-U-B-E-L, I think the E is an umlaut. Or the U is an umlaut, one of the two. Yeah, you could just Google Thomas Hubel's and just say Thomas Hubel teachings, and I'm sure you'll come up with his website or websites that are focused with his schedule of talks and his teachings.
It looks like it's Thomas Hubel, Huebl, because we don't usually use the umlaut.
Yeah, that's correct. Yes, that's right.
Okay, let me see if we have any more. Oh, no, she said it was the humanities website she was looking for, and it doesn't come up. So
it's actually www.humanitiesstream.org. That's humanity with Y, humanity, HUMANITY, stream, ST, stream.org.
there we go. Joanne put it in there. Thank you.
Yeah,
okay.
Okay.
And then it looks to me like, oh, wait a minute. Joe says your vision incorporates the ideas of Rule 12 for applicants for initiation on the use of feet, hands, and eyes. Exciting ideas.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, that's all I see. Do you have a little more of your presentation?
Yeah, I do. I'm just going to go more toward a conclusion here and the potential for education or of education. As we can see, education is more than just what the student learns from reading a book or listens to a lecture. In today's world, education is developing the student for a competitive world. However, there is considerable evidence that the mind of man is developing in creative and expansive ways. This is a positive sign that the student is becoming sensitive toward the inner plane's connections such as through impression, such as from the soul. Humanity is poised to take the next step in evolution. This will largely involve the mind of man waking up by shedding addictions, become conscious of his own consciousness, and learning spiritual responsibility for all that he says and does. It is a time where man has the freedom to make decisions which positively affect all humanity and indeed all kingdoms. The next great step in evolution will also be a movement from the personal needs of the individual to what the larger group humanity needs. This process has been underway for literally hundreds of years, but only in the last 100 years or so has a pattern of spiritual progress begun to show. So that is my talk on education in the new age, potential. And for January and February, I'm going to be talking about the fifth seed group, the political organizers, and the essence of what I was talking about today, like working with character development, working the importance of education, of teaching the masses about the importance of political participation, not necessarily political in the sense of what we think of it today, but understanding that we need to participate in the evolution of our society. And I'll also be talking certainly about the expression of the will, the right use of the will and how it's being used. So these are going to be important concepts that are going to be coming up in next month's talk. And from this point forward, well, certainly in thinking about Seed Group 2 with the trained observers, we're building this information on a complete idea of what civilization is looking like and what it can become. So I hope that everybody can hold those concepts together. So it's as challenging as trying to hold the mental, emotional, and physical together in one unit, and to be in relation to the soul and see yourself as the soul. So it's that level of challenge. So it's learning to see the whole concept of civilization working. This is regardless of culture. This is not just the American culture or the Western culture or Asian culture, whatever. This is how basically human beings think across all cultures. And it's understanding that all of these different elements of the seed groups are causing the civilization to look the way it does today, and about how we can evolve it forward. But it's a matter of being consciously aware, and education is helping with that. The media is helping with that or not. The political observers are helping with that or not, et cetera. It goes on and on. So we'll be continuing to talk about this in the months to come. So thank you all for this. And are there any more comments or insights that people have?
There are a lot of thank yous. And I just wanted to say that our next meeting is going to be the second Saturday of January. It will be the 8th of January. So hope to see you there.
Basically 4 weeks from today. Okay, great.
Okay, goodbye, everybody.
Thank you for participating. Thank you.